I remember the year the seasons stopped behaving. At first, it didn't seem like a disaster. Winters lingered sometimes, springs arrived late. We had lived through that before. We complained about the cold and went back to our work. But the ground stayed hard longer than it should have. The frost did not lift. I watched the fields each morning, waiting for the soil to soften. It never did. By early spring, we planted anyway. We always did. The seeds went into cold earth, and for a moment it looked like they might take. Green appeared, thin, hopeful. Then the cold returned. Overnight, the fields burned black. I remember running my hands through the plants, breaking them apart without meaning to. We replanted, then replanted again. Each time, the land failed us faster. By June, snow fell. I stood outside and watched it settle where crops should have been growing. No one spoke. There was nothing to say that didn't sound foolish. No one yet knew how bad it was going to get. The days grew dim. Clouds lingered without breaking. When the sun did appear, it looked wrong, pale, distant, as if something stood between it and us. Rain came often. When it stopped, frost followed. Summer never came. Food became uncertain before it became scarce. Grain prices rose quickly, faster than we could understand. Some days there was bread, some days there wasn't. Livestock grew thin. Animals that had carried us through years of work collapsed in the fields and did not rise again. We sold what we could: tools, furniture, anything that might last another week. The children asked questions I didn't know how to answer. I learned to speak less. Officials said the weather would change, that it always had. They said there was no reason to panic. I wanted to believe them. I needed to. By midsummer, hunger stopped hiding. It showed itself in the way people walked, in the way neighbors avoided one another's eyes, in the quiet that settled over homes where there had once been noise. In the towns, anger replaced silence. I heard of bakeries being guarded, of crowds breaking into stores for food that no longer existed, of soldiers standing between people and bread. Still, no one could tell us why this was happening. Some said it was punishment, others said the sun itself was failing. A few spoke of strange forces in the air. None of it mattered. The cold did not listen. Disease followed hunger, as it always does. People weakened. Fevers spread. Those who might have survived in better years did not survive this one. I remember the funerals, not because they were grand, but because they were constant. So many that grief stopped feeling sharp and began to feel heavy. The sky seemed to watch us. Sunsets burned red and orange, brighter than I had ever seen. The light felt bruised, as if the world itself had been injured. What we didn't know then was that others were seeing the same sky, that the same cold was killing crops across oceans, that this was not our disaster alone. We suffered without knowing we were part of something larger. By the end of the year, many left. They walked away from land that had fed their families for generations, believing somewhere else might be warmer, kinder, more forgiving. Some did not make it far. Eventually, the cold eased, the clouds lifted, crops began to grow again. Life returned slowly, unevenly, as if uncertain it was welcome. The crisis passed. Only much later did I learn what had happened, that a volcano far beyond anything we could see or imagine had torn the sky apart the year before, that ash had risen so high it dimmed the sun itself. By the time the cold reached us, the cause was already history. There had been no warning we could hear, no enemy we could face, no decision we could undo. We lived through a catastrophe without ever knowing its name. People like to believe the world is stable, that nature follows rules we understand well enough to depend on. I believed that once. I don't anymore. Because I lived through a year when summer never came, and I learned how fragile certainty really is. The question isn't whether something like this could happen again. It's whether we would recognize it before the ground hardens and the sky begins to darken.